It started with a strange silence in the sky, the kind that makes the world pause for a heartbeat. On that day, people across the planet woke up to a different kind of morning. There were no explosions, no meteors, no wars, just silence. Then, suddenly, every satellite around Earth began to pick up something no one could explain. A signal. At first, scientists thought it was interference, maybe a glitch caused by solar radiation. But within minutes, the same signal appeared everywhere, in military communication lines, global internet cables, even in simple radio frequencies. It wasn't random noise. It had rhythm, pattern, and structure. Someone, or something, was trying to talk. In research centers, scientists rushed to decode the transmission. It repeated itself again and again as if it was waiting for someone to answer. Within an hour, translation systems started identifying familiar sounds, tones, pauses, and repetitions that matched human languages. The message was clear and terrifying at the same time. Humanity, you are not alone. We invite you to listen. The world changed that day. Governments immediately went on high alert. Fighter jets were scrambled, armies were placed on standby, and news channels couldn't stop talking about what was happening. Was it a trap? Was it a new kind of weapon? Or could it truly be contact? Across every country, people stared at their screens in disbelief. Some prayed, some cried, some celebrated. It was the moment generations had dreamed about but never truly believed would come. For centuries, humans had wondered if anyone else existed out there among the stars. Now, the answer was speaking directly to them. Within 24 hours, the United Nations formed an emergency council made up of scientists, linguists, military experts, and philosophers. The message had repeated 12 more times, each time adjusting itself as if learning. It was adapting, responding to Earth's attempts to understand. Then on the second night, something happened that shook the entire planet. The skies above Earth shimmered like a curtain of living light. Massive energy signatures were detected in orbit. Not explosions, but smooth, rhythmic pulses. Within minutes, telescopes captured the sight of enormous geometric structures appearing above the atmosphere, calm, steady, and silent. The world froze. Social media exploded with videos. Some showed massive shining shapes hovering beyond the clouds. Others captured waves of light moving across the oceans. There was no attack, no sound, just presence. It was as if the universe itself had finally decided to say hello. When the message came again, it was different this time. It spoke clearly in every language known to humankind. We are the Galactic Council. We represent many worlds. We come in peace. For hours no one spoke. In control rooms and living rooms alike, humans simply listened. The voice was calm, layered, almost musical. Like thousands of beings speaking together in harmony. It said they had been observing Earth for centuries, not to control or destroy it, but to understand it. Humanity, they said, had finally reached a point of maturity where it could be welcomed into something larger. An alliance of civilizations working together across galaxies. People didn't know how to react. Some were filled with pride. Others were terrified. News anchors stuttered as they tried to explain what the Galactic Council even meant. Scientists argued over whether this was truly possible. Religious leaders debated if it was a divine event. But deep down, in every home and every heart, people felt the same thing and wonder. For the first time, humans were no longer alone. In the days that followed, the council sent a visual broadcast, a shimmering projection of light that appeared over oceans and deserts alike. The figures shown weren't monstrous or frightening. They were varied, graceful, and strangely familiar. Different species of intelligent life standing side by side. Some looked biological, others mechanical, but all carried an aura of peace. Their message was simple. Earth was being invited to join them. But before that could happen, they needed to know if humanity was truly ready. Not technologically, or because, as they said, machines could always evolve, but morally. They wanted to see if humans could rise above division, greed, and violence long enough to understand unity. It was not a test of science, but of heart. Governments met endlessly, arguing over how to respond. Should they trust the message? Should they ignore it? Should they prepare for battle just in case? The council never threatened, never demanded, but their silent ships in orbit reminded everyone how small Earth really was. Within a week, something extraordinary began to happen. For the first time in history, Nations started sharing resources and data. The world, once divided by politics and power, began to act as one. Scientists from rival countries worked together to build a joint communication hub. Linguists combined efforts to maintain a steady dialogue with the Council. Even ordinary people began volunteering to help, joining peace groups and online communities that promoted calm instead of fear. Slowly, the panic began to fade. Curiosity took over. The Council's next message came through the new hub. It was longer and clearer than before. They explained that countless civilizations existed across the stars, some older than entire galaxies, some younger than Earth itself. Most had struggled with the same things humanity was facing: war, corruption, imbalance, and loss. Those that survived learned to cooperate, forming a network where every species had a voice. Now, they were offering Earth that same chance, to be part of something far greater than itself. But there was a condition. Humanity would undergo observation for one full cycle, a time period equal to one Earth year. During that time, the Council would silently watch, not to judge, but to understand. They wanted to see how humans treated each other when they believed they were being watched by the universe. The announcement sent a ripple of emotion across the planet. Some cheered and called it a blessing. Others panicked, feeling exposed and vulnerable. Still, life went on, only everything felt different now. People looked up at the sky more often. They spoke softer, acted kinder. News programs began covering stories of hope rather than destruction. Even conflicts in long-divided regions slowed down as people began realizing the same truth. The world had eyes on it, and for once, those eyes were not human. Children grew up drawing pictures of stars and planets, dreaming of meeting friends from other worlds. Artists, writers, and filmmakers created stories about peace and cosmic unity. Scientists began focusing on environmental recovery, hoping to show that Earth could heal and evolve. Something was changing, not because of fear, but because of inspiration. The simple idea that humans might be accepted by civilizations beyond the stars had sparked a quiet revolution inside every heart. Of course, there were still skeptics. Some believed it was a government trick. Others feared it was an alien trap. But as the months passed and no harm came to anyone, even the skeptics started to question their doubts. The ships remained silent, hovering peacefully in orbit, like patient guardians waiting for a decision. And then came the moment that no one expected. On the final day of the observation period, the skies once again filled with light. This time the light wasn't calm or distant. It was close, warm, and beautiful. People from every corner of the world stepped outside to see the same sight, the clouds glowing gold and silver, forming patterns like a living constellation. Then, the Council spoke one last time that day. Humanity, you have shown chaos yet compassion, fear yet courage, division yet hope. You are ready to walk among the stars. The words echoed across every device on the planet. Some wept, some laughed, some simply stared at the horizon in awe. For the first time, the idea of Earth wasn't just a planet anymore. It was a member of something larger, a voice in the vast choir of the cosmos. The following morning, the lights faded, but something new appeared in orbit, a structure unlike anything humans had ever seen. It was enormous, glowing like a moon but shaped with precision beyond human imagination. The Council called it the Bridge. It would serve as the first meeting ground between Earth and the wider universe. People stood together, strangers embracing, children pointing at the sky, old men smiling through tears. The fear that once divided humanity was replaced by a single shared truth. They were not alone, and perhaps they never had been. The first chapter of humanity's new story had begun. After the Council's message, the whole world was filled with hope and curiosity. For the first time in history, humanity felt united under one sky. People looked up at night and saw the shining lights of the Council ships, calm and still, floating above Earth like silent stars watching over them. But soon, the Council sent another message, one that no one expected. It was peaceful yet serious. They said Earth would have to go through a trial, not to prove its strength or technology, but to prove its heart. They wanted to see if humans could stand together, help each other, and rise above greed and division. It wasn't a war or a battle. It was something deeper. Humanity itself would be tested. The council explained that every new civilization invited into their alliance had to show that it could survive as one. Not by fighting, but by caring. Not by conquering, but by uniting. They said Earth would face challenges that would reveal what humans truly were, and how far they had come. At first, people didn't understand what kind of test it would be, but within days, strange global events began to unfold. The first was a massive environmental shift. Crops in many countries began to fail unexpectedly. Oceans grew rougher, and the weather changed without warning. Scientists were puzzled. There were no natural explanations. It was as if the planet itself was reacting to something. The council didn't send any help. They simply said, "Show us who you are." Panic spread fast. Food prices rose overnight. Some nations began hoarding supplies. Borders tightened and fear started to grow again. It felt like the world was slipping back into its old habits. But then something remarkable happened. Ordinary people began to step up. Farmers in one part of the world started sharing food with nearby regions, even if it meant less for themselves. Engineers volunteered to rebuild water systems in drought-stricken areas. Communities formed networks to trade supplies and care for the elderly. Social media, once full of arguments, turned into spaces where people shared help and kindness. It wasn't perfect. There was still chaos, confusion, and fear. But slowly, humanity began to act less like separate nations and more like one species. The council continued to observe silently, sending no guidance, only watching. Then came the second test. A powerful solar storm struck Earth without warning. Satellites were damaged, communications went down, and power grids failed in many cities. In an instant, the world went dark. People who once depended on machines found themselves isolated, surrounded by silence and uncertainty. But instead of collapsing, something beautiful happened. Neighbors who had never spoken before started helping one another. Streets that once felt cold and distant became warm with candlelight. People gathered around fires, shared food, told stories, and comforted strangers. They began to realize that even without technology, humanity still had the most powerful connection of all: empathy. For weeks, the world lived in darkness, yet it glowed with human kindness. When the power finally returned, many people said they had felt more alive in those dark nights than in all the years before. The council sent a short message afterward: light shines brighter when shared. But the final part of the test was yet to come, and it would be the hardest. Months later, strange signals began to appear again. This time, they didn't come from the council. They came from somewhere else, deep space far beyond known galaxies. The messages were faint but full of hostility. It sounded like warnings, like someone out there didn't want Earth to join the council. Governments panicked again. Old fears returned. Military leaders began to argue about building defenses, preparing weapons, and creating strategies. Some demanded the council protect Earth, but the council stayed silent. The silence frightened people. News channels filled with rumors. Some thought Earth was being abandoned. Others believed the enemy was already among them. Fear grew like a shadow, dividing the planet once more. That was the real test. Not hunger or darkness, but fear itself. One by one, countries began blaming each other. Suspicion rose. People who once worked together started turning away from one another. Protests broke out in major cities. It was as if all the progress humanity had made was falling apart. And then, in the middle of the chaos, the council finally spoke. But they didn't send a grand speech or warning. They simply broadcast a single sentence to the entire planet. Your greatest enemy is not out there. It is within. The words hit hard. For days, the world went quiet. No one truly knew what the council meant at first. But as people looked around, they began to understand. The fear that was spreading wasn't caused by any outside threat. It was coming from within humanity itself. Mistrust, ego, and the endless need to control. Slowly, people began to change again. This time, not because of hope or curiosity, but because of realization. Small movements started forming everywhere. People went out of their way to apologize, to help, to listen. Soldiers refused orders that would harm innocents. Leaders who once spoke of power began speaking of peace. Families reunited, old enemies shook hands. Humanity started to awaken, not because it wanted approval from the council, but because it finally remembered what it meant to be human. The council watched silently from above. They didn't interfere, they didn't reward, they just observed. For the first time, they saw something they hadn't seen in any other species before. The ability to fall, learn and rise again, not once but over and over, and then, after many months of trials, the tests finally ended. The skies, which had been quiet for so long, suddenly filled with light once more. The Council's ships glowed brighter than ever before, like thousands of stars aligning across the sky. Every city, every village, every island, all looked up together. The voice of the Council returned, calm and proud. You have faced hunger, darkness, and fear, and yet you stood together. You have shown compassion stronger than chaos. You are ready to begin the next step. People cheered. Some wept openly. The world's leaders gathered once again under the United Nations banner, this time not as politicians but as representatives of a united world. It was no longer about power or territory. It was about the future of humankind. That night, something extraordinary happened. Across the sky, lights formed a bridge of pure energy, stretching from orbit to Earth's atmosphere. The Council called it the Path of Trust. It was a symbol, showing that Earth had crossed the hardest part of its journey. People all over the planet celebrated. There were no borders that night, no flags, no divisions, just music, laughter, and relief. It felt as though a new chapter of human history had begun. But deep within the Council ships, discussions were happening quietly. The observers spoke among themselves, amazed at what they had seen. No other civilization had ever passed all 3 stages of the test in such an unpredictable, emotional way. Humans, they realized, were different. They were chaotic, yes, but their chaos created balance. Their imperfection gave them strength. One of the Council's last messages before disappearing into orbit was simple, yet unforgettable. You are not perfect, but you are beautiful in your struggle. That is why the stars have chosen you. The following morning, the ships vanished. The skies returned to normal. But the world didn't. Something had changed forever. People began living differently. Countries kept their promises of cooperation. Schools taught children about unity and compassion. Technology was now used to heal the planet, not to harm it. Even nature seemed to respond. Air became cleaner, the oceans calmer. It was as if the Earth itself was breathing a sigh of relief. And though the Council was gone, everyone knew they were still out there, watching quietly, waiting for the next step. Humanity had passed its first test, not by showing perfection, but by proving that even in chaos, they could still find their way back to light. The people of Earth didn't just survive their trial. They earned their place among the stars. Months had passed since humanity completed the tests. The skies had been quiet, almost too quiet. The bright ships that once floated above Earth were now gone, leaving only faint trails of light that shimmered at night like silent reminders of what had happened. At first, people thought it was over. Maybe the Council had finished observing Earth and decided to move on. Life began to return to normal, but it didn't feel the same. Something deep inside humanity had changed. There was more kindness in the air, more patience in people's voices. Even when disagreements happened, there was a quiet understanding that they all shared the same home, the same sky. Then one day, without warning, the sky lit up again. It began as a soft glow on the horizon, like a sunrise that refused to fade. The light grew brighter and spread across the world. People ran outside, staring in awe. There were no explosions, no panic, just pure, shimmering light. Then, from that golden glow, something enormous appeared. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a planet. It was something beyond imagination, a floating structure the size of a small moon, hovering gently above Earth's atmosphere. It glowed with patterns of blue, gold, and silver, like a living piece of art. Scientists quickly named it the Grand Arc, but the Council later called it the Unity Chamber. Soon after, a message arrived, clear and beautiful in every language. People of Earth, your time has come. The alliance ceremony awaits. The entire planet froze. Every government, every leader, every community began preparing. The United Nations, which had once been divided by politics, now stood as one global voice. Representatives from all continents gathered not to argue, but to choose who would stand before the Council, not as rulers, but as the face of humanity. But the council had one request. They didn't want politicians or powerful figures. They asked for people who represented the heart of Earth, the ones who carried its spirit, not its titles. So the world chose differently: a teacher who had dedicated life to guiding children, a soldier who had seen war but believed in peace, a scientist who dreamed of discovering life beyond the stars, a farmer who had helped feed thousands during the famine, and a child chosen for pure innocence and curiosity. These 5 would represent the whole of humankind. On the morning of the Yaoi ceremony, the skies were completely clear, as if the universe itself was watching. The chosen 5 stood on a platform built at the edge of the sea, where a golden beam of light descended from the heavens. Slowly they began to rise, surrounded by that same gentle light, leaving behind the blue oceans and green lands of Earth. The entire world watched live, billions of eyes following the moment. As they ascended, they entered the Unity Chamber. Inside, it was breathtaking. Vast halls made of living light, floating structures that seemed to breathe, and walls filled with stars that moved like waves. It felt alive, not mechanical. Waiting there were the council's delegates, beings of every form imaginable, some tall and slender, others round and glowing, some with crystalline skin, others appearing as pure energy. Yet none of them looked frightening. Every face, every movement carried calmness, wisdom, and kindness. When the 5 humans stepped forward, the entire hall grew silent. A soft light formed at the center, and from it emerged the primary representative of the council. A being, with no single face or gender, just a graceful shape made of golden light. The voice echoed like music. "People of Earth, we welcome you." There was no ceremony of crowns or weapons, no grand speeches of power. The council didn't treat humanity as subjects or newcomers. They treated them as equals, as one of their own. The representative spoke again, saying that the alliance was more than an agreement. It was a promise to protect life, share knowledge, and uphold harmony across galaxies. Every civilization in the council had once stood where Earth stood now, facing the same uncertainty and fear. And now it was humanity's turn to take its place among the stars. The teacher stepped forward first, speaking softly. The teacher said that humans still had much to learn, that even after all they had achieved, they still made mistakes. But they also had something powerful, the ability to love, to forgive, and to start over. The hall remained silent, and then, one by one, the other delegates nodded in agreement. The soldier stepped forward next. The soldier spoke about the meaning of courage, not the kind used in war, but the kind that helped people protect one another. "We have fought too long," the soldier said. "Not because we loved battle, but because we forgot peace. But we are learning again." The scientist spoke about curiosity, how it drove humans to explore and understand, not just the stars, but their own hearts. "We built machines to look for others," the scientist said, "but in doing so, we found ourselves." The farmer talked about Earth, about soil, rain, and the importance of giving back to the planet that gave life. "We learned that no matter how high we reach, we still come from the ground," the farmer said. And then came the child. The child didn't give a speech. They simply looked around the grand chamber, smiled, and said, "It's beautiful." The hall filled with laughter and light. Even the oldest council members smiled. In that small voice, they saw everything: innocence, hope, and the reason all civilization survived. Then the representative of the council raised a hand. The floor beneath them glowed brighter, forming a circular pattern of lights, one for each world in the alliance. In the center, a new circle began to form. Slowly, it took the shape of Earth. The crowd of beings began to chant softly, a sound that felt more like harmony than words. As the symbol of Earth completed itself, the council announced, "We welcome the people of Earth to the Galactic Alliance. From this day forward, your world stands among the stars." The hall erupted in light. Billions of viewers across Earth cried, cheered, and held hands. The skies above the planet glowed with rings of color, as if the universe itself was celebrating. The ceremony didn't end with applause or fireworks. It ended with a quiet moment. Every being, human and alien alike, placed their hands, or whatever they used in place of hands, over their hearts. A symbol of unity, a promise. Afterward, the 5 humans were given the opportunity to walk through the Unity Chamber and see what no human had ever seen before. Vast archives of history, floating spheres of memory containing the stories of countless civilizations. They learned that even the mightiest empires once began small, filled with doubt, just like Earth. They also saw something that surprised them deeply: holographic images of Earth, captured by the Council thousands of years ago. The Council had been watching since the dawn of time, observing humanity's first fires, first songs, first discoveries. They had seen the good and the bad, the rise and the fall, but they never interfered because they wanted humanity to grow by itself. And now, after all those centuries, the wait was over. When the ceremony ended, the 5 humans descended back to Earth. As they landed, the beam of light faded and the great structure slowly began to rise higher into the sky. It would remain in orbit, the Council said, as a symbol of the new alliance, a bridge between Earth and the stars. That night, every corner of the world celebrated. People danced in the streets, sang songs in different languages, and released lanterns into the sky. For the first time in human history, everyone celebrated the same thing: peace. Children asked questions about other worlds. Scientists spoke of the knowledge humanity would soon share. Artists painted the vision of the Unity Chamber, while musicians composed songs inspired by the Council's harmony. The world felt alive again, not because of what it gained, but because of what it had become. But even amid the joy, there was quiet reflection. People realized that this alliance was not just a gift, it was a responsibility. The Council trusted humanity to represent Earth with kindness and balance. The future would not be easy, but it would be shared. As night fell, the teacher looked at the glowing sky and whispered softly, "We are no longer alone." And for the first time in human history, that sentence felt true. Completely, beautifully true. Above the world, the Unity Chamber continued to shine. Not as a sign of power, but as a symbol of hope. A promise, written across the stars, that humanity, once lost in its own chaos, had finally found its place in the vast family of the universe. The Earth had joined the Galactic Council, and in doing so it had not just changed its future, it had changed the meaning of being human. After the great ceremony, the Earth was never the same again. The night skies now carried a different meaning. People would look up and whisper to themselves, "We belong up there now." The floating structure, the Unity Chamber, still shined faintly above the clouds, a reminder of the day humanity was welcomed into the Galactic Council. At first, the world was filled with joy. News channels ran endless coverage about the new alliance. Scientists talked about technologies that could heal the planet in months instead of decades. Students dreamed of visiting other worlds. People had hope again, real, glowing hope that something greater was waiting beyond the stars. But while Earth celebrated, far away across the endless reaches of space, not everyone shared the same happiness. The Galactic Council was not the only power in the universe. There were ancient empires, powerful trade systems, and independent civilizations that had always seen the Council as their rival. For ages, they had balanced power among themselves, but Earth's sudden entry into the Council broke that balance. At first, the other civilizations reacted with disbelief. To them, humans were a young and unpredictable species, a civilization that had only recently learned how to reach space, still struggling with peace and unity. The idea that the Council had invited such a new world into their alliance caused shockwaves across the galaxies. Some called it a mistake. Others called it a warning. Whispers spread among the stars. News of the Earth Alliance reached planets thousands of light years away. In trading colonies, in royal courts, and in underground rebel stations, everyone began talking about the same thing: the humans. The universe suddenly turned its eyes toward one small blue planet. In distant star systems, debates began. Some worlds admired Earth's courage and humanity's emotional strength. They said humans were different, brave enough to dream, compassionate enough to care, and strong enough to survive their own chaos. But others didn't see it that way. They saw danger. They believed that humans were too unpredictable, too emotional, and too restless to handle the power that came with membership in the Council. Within weeks, political tensions began to rise among alien civilizations. Some withdrew their ambassadors from the Council, others stopped trading rare resources, and in the farthest corners of the universe, extremist groups began spreading fear, saying, "The humans will bring ruin." The Council, meanwhile, stood firm. They assured the galaxy that humanity's alliance was not a threat but a symbol of hope, a chance for old empires to remember what unity truly meant. But peace is fragile, even in the vastness of space. Soon, mysterious disruptions began to appear in communication networks that connected the galaxies. Energy routes were blocked, trading lanes were sabotaged, and distrust spread fast. Earth's representatives tried to stay calm. They focused on their mission, to learn, to listen, and to represent their planet with honor. The Council gave humanity access to a vast library of knowledge. In return, Earth shared ideas the galaxy had never seen before, things like music, art, compassion, storytelling, and emotion. To other civilizations, these concepts were strange. They had long mastered science and technology, but emotion was something many had lost ages ago. When humans sang or created art, it moved even the most logical species in ways they couldn't explain. Some said Earth's greatest strength was not its machines or weapons, but its heart. Yet, not everyone appreciated that heart. In the outer colonies of the universe, some powerful races started spreading false information that Earth had tricked the Council, that humans had used manipulation or secret power to earn their place. Fear grew stronger. Old rivalries between empires began to rise again, and whispers of rebellion reached the Council chambers. For the first time in thousands of years, the Galactic Council itself began to divide. Some of its members questioned whether they had made the right decision. Others defended humanity fiercely, saying that Earth had already proven its worth during the trials. Behind closed doors, quiet arguments turned into heated debates. The Council had seen many worlds rise and fall, but they had never seen a world like Earth. Humanity's unpredictable nature made them both inspiring and terrifying. While the Council debated, life on Earth continued. The planet was now undergoing rapid change. Advanced technologies shared by the Council began transforming the world. Energy shortages disappeared, diseases were cured, pollution started to clear, cities became cleaner, transport became faster, and education reached even the most remote areas. For the first time, it looked like humanity was entering a golden age. But deep inside, Earth's leaders knew the peace was fragile. The more Earth grew, the more attention it attracted, both good and bad. A few months after the ceremony, something unexpected happened. A fleet of unknown ships appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system. They didn't attack or communicate, they just hovered there, observing silently. The Council sent messages, but there was no reply. The mysterious fleet eventually vanished into deep space, but their presence left an unsettling question behind. Was someone preparing for conflict? Tension spread again. Many feared that other empires were planning to challenge the Council's authority, and Earth's entry had given them the excuse they needed. The Galactic Council decided to act. They organized a grand meeting in the Unity Chamber. Representatives from every member world were called to attend. Earth's delegates were among them, sitting in silence as thousands of alien voices echoed through the massive hall. Some speakers praised Earth, calling humans the living spark of the universe. Others demanded that the alliance be reconsidered, accusing the Council of disrupting the balance of power. The debate lasted for days. Every word carried weight. The fate of Earth, and possibly the peace of the galaxy, hung in the balance. Then, when the hall grew silent, one of the human representatives stood up. They didn't speak about politics or power. They spoke about humanity's history, about how people had destroyed their own world and still found the strength to rebuild it. How they had fought against nature, against fear, and even against themselves, and yet always managed to rise again. They said something simple but powerful. We did not come here to rule. We came here to learn. The hall went silent. Even those who had opposed Earth found themselves listening closely. There was honesty in those words, a kind of truth that technology and power couldn't imitate. After a long pause, the Council's highest members made their decision. Earth would remain in the Alliance, not as a burden but as a symbol. A reminder that even in a vast ancient universe, new hope could still be born. But outside the chamber, not everyone accepted the outcome. In hidden parts of the galaxy, secret alliances began to form. Old enemies started to whisper to each other again. The rise of Earth had shaken the cosmic balance more than anyone had expected. On Earth, most people didn't know about these growing tensions. They only saw progress, a new world of clean energy, faster communication, and endless possibilities. But somewhere in the background, the universe was holding its breath. Because change always brings fear. And fear, when ignored, can turn into something dangerous. The Council continued to support Earth, but they began reinforcing their borders and increasing patrols in nearby regions of space. Strange activity was reported near several distant systems. Fleets gathering, colonies disappearing, ancient weapons being activated. Still, the Council hoped for peace. They believed humanity could become the example that the galaxy needed, a reminder that compassion was stronger than control. On the anniversary of the Alliance ceremony, a new message was sent to all worlds in the Council's network. It was written by Earth's representatives, translated into thousands of languages, and shared across millions of planets. The message said, "We are young, but we remember where we came from. We do not seek to change your ways. We only wish to walk beside you. Let us not fear the new, let us learn from it." The message spread like light through the galaxy. For a moment it softened hearts. Even the most doubtful civilizations paused to listen. Some began to reconsider their anger. But far away, beyond the borders of known space, others saw it as a challenge, the beginning of something far bigger than a simple alliance. The universe had changed. The Council had changed, and Earth, without meaning to, had become the spark that would test the strength of peace across the stars. As night fell on the blue planet, the Unity Chamber shimmered faintly above. People watched it and felt proud, not knowing that somewhere in the distance, dark clouds were already forming. The Alliance had begun a new age, but it had also awakened forces that would soon shake the entire universe. The celebrations on Earth had barely ended when strange signs began to appear. The skies were calm, but there was something different, an uneasy silence in the stars. Scientists monitoring deep space signals noticed unusual patterns. At first they thought it was a natural energy wave, but soon they realized these weren't random. Someone, or something, was sending hidden messages through the void. These signals weren't from any known member of the Galactic Council. They carried encrypted data that even the Council's advanced systems struggled to decode. Earth scientists worked day and night, trying to uncover the meaning behind them. Weeks passed. Then one evening, a researcher finally cracked part of the signal. The message was short, and it sent chills through everyone who saw it. It said, "They know what the Council hides." The words spread quietly among the higher ranks of Earth's representatives. What did it mean? What secret could the Council possibly be hiding? Something that could shake the entire alliance. The Earth delegation decided to keep it secret for now, fearing that panic might spread if people knew. They reached out to the Council directly, asking for clarification. But the Council's response was vague, almost defensive. They claimed it was just a false signal from an old satellite system, nothing more. Yet deep down, everyone could sense the unease. The tone in the Council's reply didn't sound like denial. It sounded like fear. Over the next few days, things grew stranger. Some Council databases suddenly became restricted to Earth's representatives. Access that had once been freely given was now locked behind classified barriers. Communication between certain member species was suddenly monitored. It was clear something was being hidden. One night, an unexpected visitor arrived at the Earth Embassy within the Council's main station. A tall, thin being wrapped in a cloak of silver light. They refused to share their name but claimed to be a former intelligence officer from a distant world, once part of the Council's secret operations. The visitor spoke in a low, trembling voice. The Council's unity, they said, was not built only on trust. Long ago, they made a decision, one that still haunts them. They went on to explain that thousands of years ago, before the Council became what it is today, there was a great war in the galaxy. Entire civilizations were wiped out in the name of peace. To end that chaos, the founding members of the council created something powerful. A weapon, not of destruction but of control. It was a system that could influence minds, not to harm, but to make species agree, to remove their desire to rebel. It kept the peace by quietly shaping thoughts, guiding decisions, and preventing large-scale conflict. Most of the galaxy didn't know. They believed peace had come naturally. But the truth was that the Council had maintained order through silent manipulation. And now, with Earth joining the Council, that secret was at risk. Unlike other species, humans had an unpredictable mental pattern. Something about their emotional complexity made them resistant to influence. The Council's hidden system couldn't fully control human thought. Instead, when humans came near it, the system itself weakened. That was why so many feared Earth's alliance. The Council's most powerful secret, the invisible tool that had kept the galaxy peaceful for thousands of years, could collapse because of humanity's presence. The human representatives were stunned. They didn't want to believe it. But the more they thought about it, the more sense it made. The strange behavior of the Council, the fear in their voices, the sudden secrecy, it all connected. Now the truth stood clear. The galaxy wasn't afraid of humans destroying peace. They were afraid of humans revealing what real peace had cost. Back on Earth, the news hadn't reached the public yet. People still celebrated, still believed in the alliance, but those in charge began to question everything. Should they confront the Council? Should they tell the world the truth? If they did, the entire galaxy could turn against them. If they stayed silent, they would be part of the lie. Meanwhile, rumors began to spread through the outer colonies. Some claimed the Council was falling apart. Others believed a rebellion was forming among the older civilizations who had once served under the Council's control. As weeks passed, more evidence surfaced. Hidden records from the Council's archive showed that many smaller worlds had vanished during the Old War, not destroyed by enemies, but erased by the Council itself to maintain their perfect peace. The humans who uncovered this data felt sickened. The Galactic Council, the symbol of unity and fairness, had once played God, deciding which worlds could live or die. Still, the Council wasn't purely evil. Their intention long ago had been to stop endless war, but in doing so, they had created a peace built on silence, not freedom. One of the human delegates made a quiet promise: "We will not let history repeat itself." They secretly formed a small group, working in the shadows to gather evidence. They wanted to expose the truth not through war, but through courage, through truth itself. But before they could act, something unexpected happened. A distress signal came from a far-off system, a colony world that had just declared independence from the Council. Its communication abruptly stopped and satellite feeds went dark. The Council claimed it was a technical failure, but humans had already seen enough to suspect otherwise. They sent a small ship to investigate. What they found changed everything. The colony was gone. Not destroyed, erased. Every sign of life, every structure, every trace of civilization had been wiped clean, as if the planet had been reset. This was no accident. It was proof that the Council's old system, the one built to control peace, was still active, still removing any threat to its stability. When the human delegation returned with the evidence, they knew the choice they faced. If they revealed what they'd found, they might bring the galaxy into chaos. But if they stayed quiet, they would be complicit in a lie that had already cost countless lives. In the end, they chose truth. At the next council meeting, Earth's representatives stood before the entire chamber. Billions of beings across the galaxy watched the broadcast. No one expected what came next. The human spokesperson spoke calmly, their voice steady. "For ages you have called this peace," they said. "But peace built on silence is not peace. It is control. The universe deserves to choose, even if that choice means disagreement, even if it means pain." For a moment, the entire hall was silent. Then whispers began to rise, growing louder and louder. Some shouted in disbelief, others in anger. The council's leaders demanded proof. The humans presented the data, the hidden records, the erased worlds. The evidence of the manipulation network still running in the deep layers of the council's core systems. The truth was undeniable. Panic spread. Civilizations that had trusted the Council for centuries suddenly questioned everything. Some demanded independence. Others called for unity under a new order. The galaxy that had once seemed calm and united now trembled with confusion and fear. And through it all, the humans stood quietly. They hadn't come to destroy and only to reveal, but revelation has consequences. In the following days, chaos spread through the stars. Old alliances began to break. Protests erupted in dozens of systems. Some species turned against the Council, accusing them of deception. Others blamed Earth, calling humans the bringers of instability. Yet amidst the fear and anger, something unexpected began to grow: hope. For the first time in thousands of years, people across the galaxy began to think freely, to question, to dream again. The Council, now shaken, went into emergency sessions. They declared a temporary suspension of power and opened all archives to the public. Secrets buried for centuries were exposed, and at the center of it all stood humanity, the species that had forced the universe to face its own reflection. The truth had set them free, but it had also unleashed uncertainty. Earth's leaders knew the path ahead would not be easy. Many would hate them, many would fear them, but they also knew something deeper: that honesty, no matter how painful, was the first step toward real peace. As the galactic news networks reported the chaos, one image went viral across thousands of worlds: the image of a human standing in the Great Council Hall, head held high with the words glowing behind them. Peace must be chosen, not programmed. The universe was no longer the same. The illusion of control had shattered. Empires trembled, civilizations argued, and systems broke away. But among the dust of old lies, something new was being born, the first real chance for freedom. And as the stars flickered quietly across the dark void, humanity watched, waiting. They didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: they had lit a fire that could never be extinguished. After the truth was revealed, the universe fell into silence. A silence so deep that even the stars seemed to stop shining for a while. The Galactic Council, once the most powerful and respected organization in existence, was now broken. Its halls stood almost empty. Many of its members had left to protect their own worlds, afraid of what would happen next. Earth, once seen as the newcomer, was now at the center of everything. Billions of eyes across the galaxy watched and waited, some with anger, others with hope. Humanity had done the unthinkable. They had pulled back the curtain on a truth older than most civilizations. They had shown that peace built on control was not real peace. But now came the hardest part: rebuilding. The Council's system had collapsed, and the galaxies were drifting apart. Old rivalries began to resurface. Trade stopped in many regions. Planets that had once relied on each other for survival now stood alone. The galaxy was in danger of falling into chaos again. And in the middle of that uncertainty, Earth had to make a choice: to turn away and protect itself, or to step forward and help rebuild what had been lost. The decision wasn't easy. Earth's leaders held countless meetings, debating what to do. Many people on Earth were tired. They said, "We've done enough. Let the galaxy handle its own problems." Others said, "If we walk away now, everything will fall apart. The truth means nothing if it doesn't lead to something better." In the end, Earth decided to stay. But this time it wouldn't be as a follower. It would be as a guide, not to control, but to help others learn what freedom really meant. Representatives from Earth traveled to the shattered Council worlds, meeting with confused leaders and frightened people. They didn't bring weapons or demands. They brought words. They talked about cooperation, trust, and rebuilding together without fear. At first, many refused to listen. The wounds were still fresh. The word council had become something bitter, but slowly as days passed, small groups began to gather. People from different species started to meet again, not because of control, but because they wanted to. That was when something new began to form. Not a council, not an empire, but a network of free worlds. They called it the Circle of Light. It had no supreme leaders, no secret power. Every world had an equal voice. Every decision required understanding, not obedience. And to everyone's surprise, Earth was chosen to help coordinate the Circle's formation, not because they were powerful, but because they were trusted. For the first time in history, Humanity became the bridge between worlds. On Earth, life was changing too. The knowledge and technology shared by the Council remained, but now it was being used differently. People no longer chased power or dominance. They focused on healing their planet, their hearts, and their understanding of what it meant to belong in the universe. The oceans became clean again. Forests began to return. Cities turned quieter, filled with light and greenery. People started spending more time looking at the stars, not with fear, but with connection. They no longer felt alone in the vast universe. Still, challenges remained. Many regions of the galaxy were still lost in confusion. Some old warlords took advantage of the collapse of the Council, trying to create their own rule. Refugees fled from unstable worlds, seeking safety wherever they could find it. Earth responded not with soldiers, but with aid. They sent food, medicine, and communication teams to restore peace. Slowly, other worlds followed their example. Instead of conquering, they began helping. It wasn't easy. Some missions failed. Some people still distrusted humans. There were setbacks, mistakes, and arguments. But through it all, one thing kept everyone going. The belief that the universe could be better this time. Truly better. Months passed. Then years. The circle of light grew stronger. Meetings were held not in grand golden halls, but in simple, shared spaces. On ships, on planets, even in orbiting stations built from old council ruins. And in every meeting, one principle was repeated again and again. No world should ever lose its voice again. That became the foundation of the new era. One day, as the suns of a distant system rose, a large gathering took place on a planet called Orion. It had once been a central world of the old council, left empty after the collapse. Now it had been rebuilt as the capital of the Circle of Light. Thousands of beings from across the galaxy gathered there, humans, aliens, and species that had once been enemies. Together they stood beneath the open sky, watching as the new symbol of unity was raised, not a flag, but a glowing circle of light representing equality, trust, and shared freedom. When the light spread across the crowd, something beautiful happened. People began to cry, not from sadness, but from relief. After centuries of false peace, the universe had finally found real peace, and messy, imperfect, but honest. The human representative gave a speech that day. Their voice carried across every world. They said, "Peace does not mean silence. It means learning to listen to one another. We were once strangers in this galaxy, but now we are part of its story. Let this new beginning be written not with fear but with hope." Those words became history. Even the worlds that had once hated Earth began to change. Slowly, trust replaced fear. Trade restarted, art flourished again, and people began to travel freely between planets. The galaxy was still full of problems, but it was alive. It was free, and deep in the heart of space, where the ruins of the old council's main station floated silently, a new outpost was built. It wasn't a palace or a fortressing, it was a library that kept the true story of what had happened, the rise, the lies, the truth, and the rebirth. Inside that library, there was a single inscription carved into the wall in 100 languages. It read, "Freedom is not given. It is chosen." Again and again. Generations later, that library became a place of learning for young travelers from across the stars. They would come to read about Earth, the small world that had once been underestimated, the world that had changed everything without firing a single weapon. And every time a young student asked why Earth had done it, the answer was always the same. Because they remembered what it felt like to be controlled, and they never wanted anyone to feel that way again. Back on Earth, life had become peaceful. The Unity Chamber, the glowing structure that once represented the Council's power, now hovered quietly above the planet as a memorial. It was no longer a symbol of authority, but of memory. Every year, on the day the Alliance had been formed, people would gather under the night sky. They would light lanterns and send them upward, watching them disappear into the stars. Each light represented a promise that humanity would never stop protecting truth, no matter how hard it became. Old scientists who had lived through the early days of the Alliance often sat together, looking up at the stars with quiet pride. They had seen the fear, the doubt, the chaos, and yet they had also seen the dawn that followed. One of them once said softly, "We wanted to join the galaxy. We didn't know we'd end up healing it. And that was true. Earth had not conquered the stars. It had taught them how to dream again. As centuries passed, humans continued to travel further. They built ships that could reach galaxies that had never been explored. They met new life, learned new wisdom, and carried with them the lessons of the past. That unity cannot be forced, that freedom cannot be programmed, and that truth, no matter how heavy, always leads to light. The name Earth became more than a planet. It became a story of courage, compassion, and awakening. In the quiet corners of the universe, where young civilizations were just beginning to rise, they would whisper the same tale. Once, there was a world that dared to question the gods of peace. Once, there was a people who spoke the truth even when it broke the sky. And because of them, we are free. And so, under the endless light of the galaxies, a new chapter of existence began. One written not by fear, not by control, but by choice. Humanity had finally found its place among the stars, not above others, but beside them. And in that shared light, the universe was reborn.